Hi, I'm Colin. I'm 15 years old and I'm restoring a SAAB. As always, before the beginning of each episode, we go over last episode's winner of the guessing game. Today it's going to be Mr. Jim Price, so congratulations on using your knowledge to win. Now let's get back to the video.
Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of the Bumpy Road Show, and I'm really glad to be bringing this one to you guys. And I want to start it off by saying that I'm sorry for not putting out as much content as I previously did. School's just been really catching up to me, and I'm trying to keep up the pace with my work and my grades, and I hope that everybody can understand that, as there's just simply no way of avoiding it being a high school student. Now, there are quite a few things we want to cover in this episode, and there's some cool tricks that you can learn along the way, but let's start with the sunroof. Now with the sunroof, I had a couple of problems, but in a little clip that's going to be coming up, you can obviously see the issue with my sunroof and why we replaced it, but let me explain it to you. First, we had an electrical issue that we fixed. It was just a faulty switch, which wasn't really a big deal, but then we noticed as soon as it really did start working, it was kind of bouncing and jumping around off the track, and we realized once we uncovered the sunroof that it was actually off its rail as it had become detached. We ordered some parts, but that wasn't really quite the remedy we were looking for, but I think this clip can show it better than I can.
Now, to make sure we move forward on this swap correctly, we need to see what the manual has to say about our sunroof. As our sunroof is electrically operated, we will skip to the second portion of this page. The sunroof is operated by an electric motor, which is mounted in the luggage compartment. It's linked to the sunroof by two cables that run along each C-pillar. The sunroof is comprised of an inside panel, which is equipped with a drive unit. There are guides that run along both sides of the sunroof. These are concealed underneath the sunroof. The cable guide tubes and the cable harness are attached to a bracket on the sunroof frame. These cables are secured to anchor points on the sunroof panel, which also serve as guide studs. There is a crank for emergency manual operation of the sunroof, which is mounted on the mounting bracket of the sunroof motor, which I cover how to operate later in this episode. And it's important to note that the lining of the sunroof panel is the same as the headlining in the car. We already had the headliner out for this video, which I'll explain as to why in the next couple of videos that I release. There are drain tubes that run from the frame's corners, from the front, and from the back, which run through the rear pillars and into air evacuation boxes. The best way to explain this is to simply say that the water runs through the drains at the A pillar and the drains at the C pillar. Well, a fun fact about these manuals is that sometimes in the middle of translation between Swedish and English, there are subtle grammatical errors, which is present in the text. For those that pause for the manuals and read through them, you'll eventually start to notice these. Step 1 of actually removing the sunroof itself says to slide the sunroof back and remove the 4 screws on the front edge. Step 2 says to slide the sunroof forward until the opening is about 3/4 of an inch or 2 millimeters wide. Step 3 says to slightly raise the front of the sunroof top and slide the roof all the way forward. Remove the sunroof top by pulling it forward and upwards, thereby releasing the back. Step 4 says to remove the front guide clips. Step 5 says to bend back the locking plate and undo the nuts on the drive unit, lift the attachment slightly to free it from the retaining bolts, and set aside the leaf springs, attachments, and sleeves. Step 6 says to push the panel forwards as far as it will go and slacken the screws on the rear guide clips a couple of turns. Step 7 says to push out the guide clips, and finally Step 8 says to raise the front edge of the panel, pull forwards, and remove the entire panel. Now we move on to installation. The manual suggests for lubrication to lubricate all bearing points with Vaseline. For step 1, it says to place the panel in position with the rear guide clips loosely fitted, extended, and retaining springs for the sunroof top installed. Step 2 says to position the panel against the front stop pins, centralize the panel laterally in relation to the stop pins and the sunroof aperture. Step 3 says to insert the front guide clips and tighten the nuts until a clearance of between 0.2 and 0.5 millimeters is obtained. Step 4A says to insert the rear guide clips while the front edge of the panel is still against the stop pins and fit the screws loosely. Step 4B says to press gently from below against the rear edge of the panel, so causing it to bend enough to allow the guide clips to be pushed back enough to provide a little play. As for removing the sunroof assembly, after the headlining has been removed, the sunroof frame and the entire assembly can be removed as follows. Remove the 4 drain hoses from the corners of the sunroof frame and remove the screws securing the sunroof frame to the roof mounting frame, and then lower the sunroof frame. When refitting, check that the weather strip between the sunroof frame and the car roof is undamaged and correctly fitted. Now we actually get to the first work-related portion of this video, which is replacing the parts on the sunroof to see if it can fix our problem.
This piece right here is going to fit right into this rod, and then there's a coupling piece behind it where it should slide into and fit down. There's a little groove in there, and we're gonna fit it in there, and then it's bent. So, well, actually, we're gonna have to take these bolts out first. We got to take this nut out first just to get to it. Used a number 10 on a small wrench. It's still awkward. If you had good paint on here, you wouldn't want to do it that way. You don't want to use an open end. But since we got bad paint, so now we're going to take this piece here. We're going to slide it back, stick it in there, push it backwards, and then that'll lock into place. I need to get something to bend that down with. In this particular case, I'm going to use a flat punch, and I'm going to work it back in here, and I'm going to just tap it gently with the ball peen hammer to get these metal pieces down over that so that it holds in tight. And that's that, and hopefully we can get this back on. The rod is very much so in the way here.
A perfect example of tedious work is right here where my dad is trying to remove the rod out of its place, but it's so stubborn and not going the way he wants it to.
And it's like this rod. I wonder if I can push that rod back with a screwdriver.
In this clip, he used a long flathead screwdriver to be able to leverage and push back the rod so that we could fit our replacement piece underneath it. And once we got our piece fitted, we needed to pull the tabs down on it using a
thinner punch. See if we can bend that down some. That puts that in place there. And we're going to see if we can snap that around.
Here's a little close-up of the progress we have so far on trying to clamp that rod back down on the replacement piece, but he needed to come back with a bigger punch just for more leverage, and using a combination of the small and bigger punch, he just about got it in. But it wasn't really quite the fit we were looking for, so as a wise man once said,
when in doubt, a really big set of pliers. On there, I'm going to clamp it around there tight. And many thanks to Jordan Pagano for getting us that part that locks that in. And then we just slip the guide right back on. And that goes in place there, and we're good to go.
well, the part replacement kind of helped our case, but it wasn't really the remedy we needed, so we move on to the sunroof removal.
So today we're doing a replacement of my sunroof, and as you can see, we already have the headliner out, and that's the first step really. But what we're doing right now is we are loosening these clips that fasten onto the drain hoses which connect to the sunroof, which we'll remove soon enough. Right now we're onto these clips. Now that we got that one side done, we're going to continue to do the same on the rest of the four corners.
These are the 4 drains that we had to detach from the sunroof.
So now that we have the clip pushed back, we have these channel lock pliers that we're going to put right where the impression that the clip made was. You want to just kind of nurse it back and forth very gently. You want to keep this hose as pretty as possible because it's your drain hose. So we're just kind of rocking it back and forth, and it'll slowly just want to come out. Now, once we've got it free with the pliers, you can just grab it with your fingers and do the same thing as you were and just pull it out. And there it is. So now that we've gotten the drain hoses out of the way, now it's time to actually start taking the sunroof down. We have 3 bolts in the front that we need to take out, 2 on each side and 2 in the back. Now our first priority is getting as many unfastened as possible. So we're going to start by taking 3 out on each side, so the 2 on the sides and the 1 on the left and right sides of the front. But we're going to keep the middle ones in, and we're going to keep the back ones in just for stability. Don't want to drop it out yet.
You want to be very precise and selective with the bolts that you take out from the sunroof before you're actually ready to do it, because we have some other steps that we need to complete first before dropping it.
Now, with removing the sunroof, we got to worry about the cables that push the sunroof to and forth inside of the car. Now, that is operated by a motor that typically lies right here, but we took it out a long time ago. But these cables right here, the sunroof cables, are going to have to come out with the sunroof itself. Before removing the roof, we got to separate the cable from this clip, and you do that just by pulling it out.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, pulling off that whole clip and not just the line is a little bit embarrassing, but good thing I had my dad there to make sure that everything is in order. Now, after you complete that step, you're actually ready to remove this whole sunroof assembly, but just for the sake of housekeeping, I'd make sure that everything is properly disconnected before you drop the sunroof, such as the drains connected to the sunroof, the line that goes to the motor, and to make sure that the sunroof is unplugged from the sunroof motor as well. After we double checked our process, we dropped the sunroof, disconnecting the remaining bolts, and I just slipped out from underneath. Ordinarily, this is supposed to be a 3-man job, but we mustered the perseverance for just the 2 of us to get it done right. Now, just having 2 men on the job, it stresses the point on making sure that it was done right, because just double checking everything decreases the chances that something gets torn out of the car, or even worse, something breaks.
Now, we not only need to check the stems for the sunroof, but we also need to check the drain hoses themselves. We want to make sure that whenever water is inside of them, it doesn't just clog up and go onto the sunroof so that it can leak into the car. We want to make sure that it goes all the way to the ground and the drains work properly.
Following those steps in reverse order, we got the replacement sunroof in the car, and now we get to deal with the sunroof motor.
So now that we've finished the installation of the actual sunroof, now we need to make it operate. The way we're going to do that is right here. I have my sunroof motor, and in the center you see this little gear. You want to make sure that it's properly greased before you put it in, because it makes the operation run a whole lot smoother. We have my 2 cable ends, which are brothers, and we'll show you how they fit right here. We have the 2 cables that pull the sunroof with that cog that we mentioned in the center to and from the front of the car. And so the sunroof will actually sit like this, and we need to use this plate right here to seal these 2 in. So we're going to put this all together right now.
So in that last clip, I might have gotten my sides flipped on how the sunroof motor is going to look when mounted. So what you see right now is how it really should look when installed. First, we need to connect our sunroof cables with our cable tubes, and I must admit trying to align these cables with the gear was a struggle at first, because you have to manage the 2 cables that just don't want to sit in one place, but I eventually got the hang of managing both ends. And it's important that you mount the passenger side cable on the top and the driver's side cable on the bottom. Eventually, after wrestling with the cables for a little bit, I managed to find a point to where I could add the plate that holds down and secures those cables. You can see that I aligned the ends with the tubes, with the little slits on the plate, and simply fastening down with the washer and nut, and like that, we're ready for the sunroof motor to be mounted.
So we've got the motor better aligned in position. We have our bolt holes that are ready to be put in here and here. We have our 2 bolts here, and let's put it together.
Now, mounting this sunroof motor felt like a 2-man job, just having to hold up the entire thing and then having to align the bolts with the holes and just making sure it doesn't fall somewhere in the process. And sometimes it can especially be a pain if one of those bolts ends up cross-threaded. But of course, it's just the fun in learning. Well, now that we have the sunroof motor mounted, it's time to get on with the next part of the video, which is some interesting facts that you may or may not have known about the motor. Let's get into it. So now that we've got the motor installed, we actually need to plug it in. So we have the motor end and we have the connecting end. Okay, so that's all plugged in. And some interesting things while we're here to point out. This little gadget right here, it's asked about all the time with people trying to open their sunroof manually. Now this little gadget is actually a handheld crank which fits onto the end of our motor right here. There's a little stem which this little circled end fits onto. So During my explanation of the emergency sunroof crank, our camera had died, which meant there wasn't a way for me to capture the operation of the crank and actually show how to fit the lever onto the crank. So for the sake of messing with the formatting of these videos, I tried something new, and what you're looking at here is my 3D replica of the sunroof motor and the crank. The way the emergency crank works is the lever mounted to the actual motor mount, as it is shown here. You simply slide it out and attach it to the stem on the passenger end of the motor, and simply crank whichever way you wish to roll the sunroof. Now, it's not a terribly fast process, and the speed of the sunroof rolling back and forth isn't impressive by any means, but it's a wonderful and brilliantly engineered alternative to an electrical problem. So now that we've got the sunroof put in, it's time to install the drains back onto these stems. Our first step is to lube the stem and the drain up with Awesome, just so it slides back on a little bit easier than it came out. So I'm just gonna take it, put a little bit inside, and like smear it on the edges. And we're gonna ease it on there. And we're in all the way, and that Awesome really made a difference. Sorry for my hiccups. So we take the fastener. You can see the little impression with the light, maybe. You can see the little impression right here that this little clip made. And that tells you exactly right where you're gonna put it back on. So we're just gonna slide it over. Oh, and right there we are. I'm gonna take the ratchet, I'm gonna fasten it. And finally, reattaching the drains to the sunroof will finalize this sunroof replacement.
Before we end this video off, I just want to thank everybody for sticking through these videos with me, and it's a whole process in and of itself, especially with school getting in the way, but I want to thank everybody who still checks my videos and gives me feedback on them, because it really does matter. Now, in the next couple of episodes, you're going to be seeing a huge reveal. As you might have noticed, the first step that I mentioned earlier was removing the headliner to be able to get the sunroof out, and the headliner isn't the only thing missing, and you're going to find out why in the next couple of videos. But along with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving and future holidays to come, depending on when you see this video. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.
For the hint for the next episode, now I must admit it's going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but here it is. I'm wondering if you guys can, of course, guess it in the comments and spread your knowledge around and maybe get a shout out in the next one. I hope everybody has a great holiday or holidays to come, and I hope to see you in the next video.